to Testbirds Training Academy. We'll allow the other people, because we're still missing and waiting for a few people, 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we're ready to start with this webinar. So that looks good. So basically the agenda, first topic is the Testing 4.0 introduction. It's about what the heck is behind Testing 4.0. That will be rather quick. Then I would focus briefly on the development lifecycle, how we see the development lifecycle. And then the biggest part will be around the testing methods for each stage. So in each stage of the lifecycle, we have different challenges, and so therefore different services, innovative services are needed in order to overcome those challenges. And that's the topic for today's session. But where are we? First of all, I would like to briefly introduce Testbirds. So this is the marketing slide, and myself. So we will share the next 45 to 60 minutes together. So real quick about Testbirds. The company is around about 5 years old. We have the vision to become the world's leading company for innovative testing services. And our focus is basically in supporting our clients to overcome all those challenges that we have today in our today's world while testing applications. Yeah, you see a picture of myself and the video. I'm one of the founders and CEO of the company, and testing was part of my life almost since the beginning of school. Until now, it's even more. So this is part of the company's DNA as also my personal DNA. So that's it about myself. Why are we talking? And I want to have a few motivational slides in the beginning. I guess a few people of you are familiar with this slide. This slide shows you the Android device diversity, part of it actually, and the market proportion that they have in the market. And what we basically see is it's pretty hard these days to make sure that an app runs on all those different devices. This becomes even more complicated because we're not only talking about the local issue, but we're talking about a global testing needs. So if it comes to how can I run my app in 20 different languages in 40 different countries, and maybe they even connect through different mobile operators, that makes everything even more and more complex. So that's on the device issues. And secondly, and this is my favorite slide in this presentation, it's about target group relevance. You know, 10 years ago, software was used by IT people, and no one really cared about user experience and usability, and only used it at work, and the UI was not good. Well, you had to live with it. That has tremendously changed, latest since the iPhone. And nowadays, everyone is a target group for a few apps. So if an app is successful, it's basically decided if it runs on all the different devices. That's the first part of the slides I've shown. And secondly, if people understand and accept what your app is all about. So we're talking about the user experience. And the question is, how do you have access to your target group? Moreover, organizational blindness is an issue that we've seen over 5 years in the market. And I myself, when I was a developer, I always knew how my app worked, but somehow my users didn't. And I always thought that it's their issue, but actually it was my issue because I didn't really see what they really needed. And another one to add these 4 issues besides the mentioned target group relevance and device diversity is the issue about lack of resources. How can you have all those resources, all those different devices, all those people that you need to run those tests on all those different devices? So traditional testing is not enough in my point of view. And in our digital world, we have to address those challenges with a new approach. And that approach is called Testing 4.0. So I would like to introduce on 1 or 2 slides what Testing 4.0 is. And Testing 4.0 is basically the next level, the next generation of quality from the traditional testing methods that we still use, and we should continue to use those. But in order to overcome all those challenges, we need new tools, we need new technologies. One part is the crowd. So So crowd testing is basically using a community of more than 100,000 people in more than 180 countries, and they together have more than 250,000 devices. So actually my iPhone is also part of the crowd, and those people will then split up the different tasks and test on multiple devices in a timely manner. And therefore we found more than 100,000 bugs, and can provide, besides the bug testing, we can provide almost any kind of target audience. So the community is not only IT, techie, very nerdy people, but it's also about everyday people. So my mom, if she's watching, she's also part of our target audience, and she tested several apps as well in order to give good feedback for our clients that they can improve their user experience for their target group. On the other side, there comes cloud technologies into the Testing 4.0 portfolio. So basically, under cloud technologies, and cloud is a buzzword, but for us, actually, it's providing, on one hand, device environments. So, for example, any combination of virtual machine on Windows, Macs, or Linux, but also on emulated devices on iOS and Android. So this basically gives a highly scalable technology in order to execute tests on basically millions of different device combinations. And how we fit that into place, I will show you now on, first we'll have to go and talk about the development lifecycle, and then we can further focus on the different services that can be used in order to improve an application throughout the different stages in the life cycle. So actually, it doesn't really matter if you're running in an agile environment and you have weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly sprints, or you're still running on the old good waterfall model, or you're doing something in between, as most of the people actually doing. Almost every application goes through those 5 different stages. And it starts on top with the concept phase. So it starts with, I have an idea, I have nothing else, but I have an idea and I want to validate the concept. Once you've validated your concept, we go into prototyping. So you draw some wireframes, for examples, to give the application a first look and feel. Then actually, once we defined, okay, these are the right prototypes, set how the user flow should look like, then it goes into the development and the developers start building the application. Then we have a deep testing phase and the final release phase. And it really depends on which stage an application is, and it will face several different challenges. So this model and those 5 stages will further guide us and walk us through the remaining of the presentation. And basically what I want to show is how we can use a Testing 4.0 portfolio and several services behind it in each stage. So the services, the innovative testing services and methods are clustered into 3 main categories. The first category is the quality assurance part. The middle one is the usability and UX part. And then this is very Testbirds branded stuff. We have Testbirds exclusive services, which are kind of invented by us in order to overcome some other challenges that we haven't seen in the market so far. And this together builds a portfolio of Testing 4.0. If we go further in detail, there could be like 22 different services. And no, I will not walk through all those services, but I want to give you a real quick snapshot on the different services. So for example, here you see that several QA related services, from test case creation to execution, exploratory bug testing, over to load performance testing. But actually today, in my presentation, in this first webinar, I will show you where test case execution and test environments will fit into the app development lifecycle. Same for usability and UX. There are many things where we can ask a target group to give valid and valuable insight into an application. But today I only want to focus on 2 really interesting services called prototype evaluation and card sorting. Last but not least, if we jump to the Testbirds exclusive category, we will today talk about the buggability tests. I'm not sure if anyone heard about that before, but I will define and give you a nice case study later on, and end-to-end testing. So what I want to do next is basically take this development lifecycle, walk through every stage, and pick one or two services out of the Testing 4.0 portfolio from the crowd world, but also from the cloud technologies, and give you a real-world case example that might help you to consider and to understand the whole concept in a nicer way. So first of all, I already told you that the first stage, in my point of view, is the concept phase. So let's say we have an app which we have in concept, we have a basic idea around it, and the next step is to think about the navigation and the menu structure. So we could use a card sorting test, which is part of our usability and UX category. And it is usually facilitated in the concept phase, as we're here in the concept phase, and it gives you support in order to find out what your target group considers a clear and simple navigation system. In easy words, how should you cluster your navigation if you, let's say, have 50 menu items? How can you make this in a nice navigation structure that makes sense for your target audience? Not for experts, it's for the real user. So the first case study that I would like to share with you is a network provider who was starting to renovate and redo the whole website. And part of that website was to give it a completely new menu structure, because they had, through various feedback channels, they figured out that the target group is actually not really happy with the existing structure. So they wanted to build a new structure with an extensive menu, and also did do some more design adaptations to give a more user-friendly navigation. So the test was set up with 50 different testers, and they had to browse through different menu items, and we had, or the client did define 5 top categories, and they had to filter and sort them within each of those 5 boxes. Basically, using those results from those 50 testers, the client worked forward and created a new sitemap, and through that, when using that sitemap, created a new menu structure, which then supported the user to have a clear view on the complex website of our client. And that's a brief snapshot on how this could look like. We had basically the 5 main categories that you can see here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And these others where they couldn't cluster in those clusters. So using a card sorting mechanism, we could help the client to come up with a very nice and simple sitemap created by 50 of their clients. So first stage done. Now we have an idea, we have a clear menu structure, and now we move on to start going and building some prototyping. So what's the main challenge that you usually have in a prototyping phase? You have an idea, you validate the concept, now you have the first user flows and the first screens, and before you actually invest money into building this application, why not get feedback from your target audience in a very early stage? So how could that work? So in here, this is a prototype evaluation service, also from our usability UX stream. And this gives you very early end user insights into how people will perceive and act with your product before you actually invest money and start developing something. We're here in the prototype evaluation phase, and so we have a case study here about a company, a beverage company, had an anniversary app, and the concept behind was the user can enter a raffle by uploading pictures, and we selected 30 people from their target audience, and they had to review the design and the navigation features and to give feedback on potential improvements. So basically what happened with those clients is that we're not only doing one loop of testing, but you have the first round, the client adapts a few things, and then you could ask the same or a similar target group again for the next feedback. So you have an iterative approach to come up with the best result. So yeah, the result obviously is a well-designed application which is validated by the end users before you actually start developing it. And this can start in different stages. So sometimes you have very sketchy or just sketched examples. So on the left, you'll see an example of a financial website, which is obviously just a sketch, a mock-up. On the right, you see the example from the retail industry that I've given before. That stuff basically that we send to our testers, and testers then can validate and give feedback in a way, kind of a survey questionnaire kind of thing. All right. So hopefully Skype will not leave me again. And I would like to walk to the third step here, which is the development phase. So now we are really starting to build the application, and the main challenge is how can I continuously test throughout the development lifecycle, not to build everything and then test it and then see that half of it is not working, going back, but how can I in an agile but also in a waterfall way, how can I continuously test my applications? So this is now going into our quality assurance area of Testing 4.0 portfolio. And here I would like to talk about test case execution. So you have well-defined test cases step by step. You have an actual or an expected result, and you want to make sure that every week, every 2 weeks, every month, whatever the cycle for you is, that those test cases are executed either manually through a tester or automated through a framework. And that's also the two cases that I've prepared for this service. Is basically on the manual testing, we have a provider of a cloud-based storage platform, and they launched a new product, and so they wanted to incorporate a crowd testing group into their development cycle to frequently test their application, and it was found out that there were major issues from moving files in several browsers, which they haven't found with their internal QA team. On the other side, there's automated testing, and we'll always have the discussions and about when is manual testing, when is automated testing the better thing to do. I believe it's a combination of both, and it depends on the maturity of an application. Nevertheless, we had a complex website that integrates a lot of different features, and our client wants to make sure that with every new feature that is added, that the core features are tested in a way of a regression test every night, overnight, on a range of different devices. And when the client comes into the office in the morning, that they see a daily report, which is monitoring what went well and what didn't went well, and if the release can go live as expected. So as I can't demonstrate this perfectly on my computer here, I will show a quick video that we created in order to show you how automated testing can be run using our technology. So first of all, what we're using here is Jenkins, a combination of Jenkins, Selenium, and Test Chameleon. So for the people who are familiar with you here, we just extended the Test Chameleon library, and we're defining two computers or two virtual machines, one Windows computer and the Mac computer. We'll add a few more lines of code specific to Test Chameleon, and the remaining part is the out-of-the-box test case that you have in your suite or the clients have. So we didn't touch any of the Selenium test case itself. We had a few more lines of code later on. And we can now trigger in our Jenkins, we can basically trigger that test case execution. So the question is, where comes Test Chameleon into place? That's how we call our virtual machine technology. Test Chameleon is extending frameworks such as Selenium and basically providing the device environments that will then execute the test cases itself. So as you've seen, we defined the Windows 7 computer and the Firefox, And we're now watching. Usually you wouldn't do this. Usually you would go for get a coffee because that's an automated test. But here we are now watching what happens actually when the test case on Selenium is executed in a virtual environment on Test Chameleon. So this was just a dummy that we've built just for fun with on the Adidas web shop. Basically, what we try to do is if a fake address is validated, happens here, so there's a fake address, and then in a second try, we try to use a fake credit card, and which is also validated and recognized as a fake credit card. And if we move forward, here we go. The same test case, and I'm just jumping ahead basically, is that the same environment or the same test case is now executed on the second environment that we have defined. So this is a Mac computer with running on Chrome, and it's 100% doing exactly the same test case. Again, in real life, you wouldn't watch this, and you would also run not only 1 or 2 simple test cases, but hundreds. And you also wouldn't run it on 1 or 2 devices combination, but maybe on another 100 or 200 or 1,000 overnight, and then you will see, you will gather metrics on which device it failed. So now that we talked about development, so we have, and all about is about testing, but here comes a special phase, which is the big testing before the release, let's put it that way. So here, it might get even more complex to test with all the different combinations, but also if you have interactions with connected devices. So we're not only talking about a mobile app, a web app, a website, an e-commerce shop. It can also be like any kind of smart device that is connected to another smart device, such as smart home, connected cars, Internet of Things, Internet of Everything, and so on. So in these examples, I picked a more complex example to show you it can become really complex, but also really interesting for testing. So this is now out of our Testbirds exclusive box, where we combine, and it's called end-to-end testing, where we combine the digital world with the real world. So in this way, testers have to interact between different components with the crowd. So that means a crowd tester uses his smartphone to connect to a smart device and test that application and the connectivity between those two. So the example that I have prepared here is an end-to-end testing. It's a case study from one of the world's largest electronic manufacturers, and they had a new baby monitor. So this is not yet really a smart or connected device, but once this tool, basically the webcam, connects to an iPhone, this makes it a connected application. And which makes it even more complex is who's the target audience for a baby phone? Right, it's mothers and fathers who have children under 2 years. So the challenging task was here to find 50 mothers and fathers with children under 2 years old in several countries in the world, and test basically not only once and then that's it, a day or a few hours, but basically they were interested in the overall experience. What happens if someone uses that application and that tool, including the camera, over weeks? So the actual testing phase was running for a month, and they had to basically document the whole entire process from unpacking the tool, connecting it, watching the first, setting it up in the child's room, using it to work, going back from work, and so on and so on. And they had to document everything in a user diary, but also not only giving user feedback, but also looking obviously for bugs and if the app is stable enough on the real world environments while you're traveling using the subway and stuff like that. And there was an extensive questionnaire with open and closed question where all the feedback was captured, aggregated, and the client could improve, basically fix the bugs and improve the user experience. All right, now let's move to the last and most exciting phase of every development lifecycle when it comes to the release. And that's the question where a product owner always asks, okay, is the app really ready to be released? Are we sure? Are we not running in a nightmare on the App Store reviews? So that's why we have this buggability test. And as you can imagine, this is a word that we came up with, which is a bug test combined with a usability test in order to provide basically feedback from both areas. Is it almost bug-free? And is the user experience, are there any red flags in terms of the user experience? So we're combining those really two critical components to give a last check, basically. You can call it a 360 check on your application. And here I really want to show you now a real example. So therefore I have to open up the browser, and I hope that everyone can see it. So I'm now on our nest. That's where all the testing 4.0 magic happens. I'm logged in and signed up as a demo client. So this is the perspective from a client's point of view. I know that we'll have a few testers in this webinar as well. It looks a little bit different for them. And it again looks different for our project managers who are basically managing the tests and the testers and everything. So here I would like to focus on a buggability test of the NBC News app. So the spoiler here is that we basically NBC is not a client. We just picked their app and sent a few testers to have a case that we can share in the public. So what we can see here is that we had 25 testers participating in this test, and that 26 bugs have been found and approved, found by our testers and approved by our project management. This test was executed on iPhones or on iOS and on Android. You'll see a list of different devices that participated in here. And then we see the test script basically in the lower end of this page. So we see some details, some overview for our testers. So it's about performing use cases, documenting a test in a written report, providing screenshots, answering a few open and closed questions, and very important, look for bugs and report them. So how this happens basically is that we then define use cases and questions. So in this way, we'll basically guide our testers how to walk through the application, and we can also make sure that we cover the most important aspects of this test. So we have a few use cases, they will get a few questions. We have many different options on what kind of questions we can ask. So this is a sorting, so per drag and drop, you can basically move the items into a priority list. Then we can, then they were asked to give some impressions. First impressions of the app, and then do a lot of more tasks. And I will not walk through them in detail, but just to give you an example on how detailed such a test usually is. So we had 7 use cases, followed by some final questions to give like an overall expectation of the, to rate the expectation, to give some open feedback in order to improve it, if you would recommend it, and so on and so on. So those 25 testers have then to report and fill out all of those questions and that protocol. So I'm now only showing you the protocol, which shows test coverage, as well as the user feedback. So you will see 25 individual reports, such as those filled in, also including screenshots, to prove that this tester actually performed the work and also rated and answered all the questions. Secondly, besides the user feedback, which is also then aggregated and summarized in a final report, we also have bugs. And those can be found here. So we have some quick analysis in charts down here. You can sort and filter them as you wish. They can be exported and many other things, but I would just pick one of those bugs that we have seen. And that's how a typical bug report looks like. So you have a bug ID, you have a title, what's the issue, so something with the search function, the result list is not entirely visible. This happened on an iPhone 5S running on iOS 8.4, as you can see on the right. And then we have a detailed report. So we have a step-by-step description on how to reproduce the bug. We'll have an expected result here, an actual result. We have a few or one screenshot. And in this one, really nice, we also have a video that documents the issue. So basically down here, for some reasons, we can't see all of the results. And that's really interesting because there's a lot of information and you can pass on all of those information to your development team, and hopefully and mostly they're able to fix the issue and build it in the next release. So now there's one issue with that, because unluckily you don't have an iPhone 5S running on iOS 8.4. So you can't really run a retest to make sure that the bug was fixed. But there is the Testing 4.0 portfolio, which is now giving you access to the cloud environment by clicking on this button. And what actually happens, because we capture all the data and we know on which device this happened, we can now create this emulated device in the cloud. And I can, in 1 or 2 minutes, I'm able to access this device and reproduce the bug on the new or freshly built application in order to look if it's still there or if I fixed it. So the device is currently booting, and as we're running out of time, I already prepared it, but I will show you in a second that once I'm done, that this device is ready to be tested. So I'm now going on this device. So I have this wonderful old iOS 8 point something. And I can now navigate using the Safari browser and my keyboard, and I can go to mbc.com and follow the test description, the step-by-step description that we've seen in the previous slide, and just navigate and try to reproduce the issue again. So that's basically the power. The power of Test Chameleon in our cloud environment. So finishing and now going back to what my introduction slide was about, the 4 main issues that we see and how Testing 4.0 can solve or help solving those issues. Regarding the organizational blindness, there are more than 100,000 people globally in the world. Through a crowd approach, you can always get fresh people, but also known people, to give you feedback and to try to crash an application. So unbiased testers can definitely help you to overcome that issue. The lack of resources, you have access to more than 250,000 devices in the cloud, a combination of more than 1 million different devices in the cloud, which is almost ad hoc available. So if you want, you can pretty quickly start with the crowd tests, and the cloud technology is 24/7 available. Target groups can be filtered through our socio-demographic selection. So every tester who signs up fills in a questionnaire about themselves, which we can then use to filter and find the target group. And as mentioned, more than 250,000 devices in the crowd and almost unlimited access to our virtual devices will give you access and help to overcome the issue with all those different devices, not only on Android. So I was quicker than expected. Actually, this is already the Q&A slide. Thank you so much for attending and joining. We have 19 minutes left for questions if you have any around the development lifecycle that you can see on the left, and or the Testing 4.0 portfolio consisting of quality assurance, usability UX, as well as Testbirds exclusives. So I'm looking over to the question section. So if you have a question, please just type them in here, and I'm happy to try to provide an answer. Thanks, Andy, for Andreas for the first question. The first question: what's your personal favorite service? Actually, it's not a service. My favorite component of the Testing 4.0 platform is what we call internally the magic button. That's the one I just pressed when I launched and tried to launch this old iOS version, which is an extremely helpful tool for developers to retest an issue that was reported through the Nest. The other question was if the webinar was recorded. Yeah, it was recorded, and actually it is still recorded. And we will share that soon through our website or social media channels, so you can rewatch it. Okay, another question: how much experience has the testers? So that actually depends. We have testers with a lot of experience, and we have testers who just recently joined. And both of them are really interesting because very experienced testers has a different model on how to try to break an application as one with less experience. However, we have in our community, we have a tool, or we have a lot of gamification aspects, and one of it is the experience points that we have. So basically what we have, every tester collects experience points according to how many bugs they find and how many tests they participate. And that gives us a global ranking as well, and we can find very experienced and less experienced testers. And actually, our recommendation is always to have a few experts and a few mid-experts and a few beginners, because then you have basically the challenges of the crowd. Which automation tools do you recommend? Was the next question by Thomas. So we're here. So it depends on where you're running. If you're running for a website or an app, and in which language or for which operating systems it runs. Actually, I think there isn't one true answer to this. It really depends on your setup. What we usually recommend, if you have something in place, don't change it, and try. You could still run using that for Test Chameleon. But if you're interested in a more technical answer, happy to send us an email, and I'll let our automation experts give you an overview of what's the best tool, and maybe this is something that we can use for an upcoming webinar. Yes, we will hold more webinars in the future. We're currently working on our curriculum on different topics. Test automation is definitely one of them. How to use Test Chameleon for web and app is another one. How to use the self-service to start fraud tests will be also another one. When will Testing 4.0 be available for us testers? That's an interesting question. We're considering if we make this cloud component for some tests available. I think our crowd management will keep you posted for that. For the slides, if we make them available, I think so too. We'll definitely make the video available, and I think we can also attach those slides to that video. If you can see the ranking of the testers in the Nest, if you're a tester, you can see, I believe, the top 100 in the Nest. Yes, you can. Luca asked, how can I create the right question to test a prototype? That's actually a very interesting question, and I have two answers for that. If you ask Testbirds, we will give you one of our experienced usability experts, and they will draft questions for you together. On the other side, this is also actually what we want to do with our self-service webinars in the future, in order to train you on how to write proper questions to test prototypes. So we'll keep you posted on this one. Okay, from Blaney. Yeah, Lane, you can just sign up on our platform, and we'll try to give you some more work to do. Otherwise, I think there are pretty cool tools out there. What you can definitely check out is our Bird School, which is our e-learning part for testers, which is incorporated into our nest if you sign up as a tester, and you can learn on how to find better bugs, give better usability feedbacks in there. So for Ben, on slide 25, we have a spelling issue. Wonderful. That was the Easter egg and you found it. Thank you very much. And always keep testing. I think that's a nice slogan. Oh, what's coming up in the next training session? I missed the question from Suzanne up here. We will always keep you posted through our website and through our social media channels. So we're currently working on the next session, and also happy to receive feedback via email from you guys. If you want to dive deeper into one of the things that you've seen here and which area is of interest for you. You're welcome. All right. Are there any more questions? All right, then, yeah, guys, thank you very much for joining this first ever training academy by Testbirds about testing 4.0. We'll keep you posted. There will be more and more webinars coming up, and we hope there was something for you in this session. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us on various channels. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining again. Bye-bye.